Hitchcock here. We got a fantastic program for you. Well, we think we have a fantastic program for you every time, but this one is special. We have as our guest today, David Sneed, the Executive Director of the Coastal Conservation Association of North Carolina. David, welcome to the program.
Hey, Bill. Thanks for having me on.
Just as a friendly reminder for everybody that we went and approached, I call them four executive directors, approached Kathy Rawls, who's the director of the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries, Glenn Skinner, who's the president of the North Carolina Fisheries Association, and at the time, I just went, Rob Bizzle, my mind just went blank, who was the chairman of the Marine Fisheries Commission. We got interviews with them. Did we save the best for last? We think so. We got David Sneed. All right, David, first off, I asked everybody the same question. What are the 3 or 4 topics you want to talk about? You suggested, and I wrote them down, coastal conservation, fisheries management, science, and politics. Your first topic that you listed is ideal for us to lead off with on coastal conservation. For the folks that are watching that might not be familiar with the Coastal Conservation Association, tell us what the organization is, what your primary goals are, and what you try to accomplish.
So we are first and foremost, a conservation organization. So we are a community of like-minded conservationists, anglers. We're working to promote sound management of our public trust marine and estuarine resources for the use and benefit of current and future citizens. We look at it as sort of our overarching goal is that all user groups of these coastal fisheries should be, the overarching goal should be the health and long-term viability of the resource. So we try to look out for what is best for our coastal fisheries to make sure they're sustainable for future generations.
This might sound like a goofy question, but your coastal conservation, does that mean I have to be a diehard fisherman to participate with your organization?
No, not at all. I mean, the majority of our members probably do enjoy fishing, but there are a lot of people that just care about the resource and want to do what they can to make sure that it's healthy and sustainable. People that just love to go to the coast and they love to see, dolphins and birds and sea turtles and those things to be healthy. And another part of promoting healthy fisheries is also working towards healthy habitat as well. So we get involved with projects that also involve, have water quality implications. We like to say that healthy fisheries start with healthy habitat. So we've been involved over the years in a number of projects that involve either habitat restoration or the creation of new oyster reefs. We did a big project with the city of Jacksonville on their New River Oyster Highway a couple of years ago, where we actually had people that went out and got in the water and helped build new oyster reefs. And we've done some artificial reef projects with DMF. So there's a lot of ways that folks can get involved and support our organization that don't necessarily fish. One of the things that we're very proud of, I want to mention before we go on, is that we have been involved the last 10 years with our veterans and active duty military personnel through our Onslow Bay chapter down in Swansboro. And we host 2 fishing weekends for active duty and veterans down there, where we take them out fishing. Our members and supporters will volunteer their time and their boats and their gear and their expertise to take folks out fishing. And so that's a big part of what we do as well.
One thing I do want to bring up before we move on, now your offices are in Raleigh, and you're talking about the Coastal Conservation Association, so obviously coast. I do want to bring up, when it just got this from the Division of Marine Fisheries, they came out with a report, we just did a show about this, that it's very, very interesting that year in, year out, the counties that have the most saltwater fishing license holders are always the same. It's always the same five. It's Wake County, Raleigh, Onslow County, New Hanover County, Brunswick County, and Carteret County. With one exception, there was one year in 2020, there was Johnston County made the top five and booted out Carteret County. I bring that up because this used to be a big frustration for me doing television in the 80s, 90s, and O's, that salespeople just think in terms of, when they're trying to sell ad time, they're thinking in terms of, well, they're not on the coast. Well, that's right. The people aren't on the coast. They're coming on down. So it is a universal thing that it's just not pertaining to folks that live down on the coast. It's folks in Raleigh and Charlotte, Winston-Salem, and Greensboro, Fayetteville, all over.
Absolutely. And when we talk about public trust resources, that's very important that the people of the state are all owners of these resources, whether they live at the coast or not. And we do have chapters all the way to Charlotte. We have members in the western part of the state and all over the state. So you're exactly right.
Okay, this I'm going to jump to the bottom with science and politics. You're talking about public trust resource. Is it okay to make mention of the lawsuit that CCA has with the state in regards to that?
It is. I don't want to get into too many details because it is
fine.
Ongoing litigation, but sort of the core principle of the lawsuit is about the public trust doctrine, and that, I've got notes on all of these things as well. So if I look down, I'm looking at my notes as well. But
that's fine.
The core principle of, when we look at the North American model for wildlife and fish conservation, the number one principle of their 7 core principles is about the public trust doctrine. And this is about, the natural resources of this state belong to the people of North Carolina, to all the citizens, and they're held in trust by the state. So the state acts as a fiduciary, and it's their duty to protect these resources from harm, injury, or destruction. And so what the lawsuit is about is that basic public trust right of the citizens of North Carolina to ensure that they have these public trust, these coastal fisheries in perpetuity.
We could do an entire show just on this topic. There's just one other thing that you made me think of that I want to bring up is the General Assembly. The Division of Marine Fisheries, the North Carolina Fisheries, so it doesn't matter who, the final folks, and correct me if I'm wrong, the final folks or in the General Assembly are elected officials. That's who we have to present things to if we want to affect change. Is that correct?
That's correct. So you have the legislature, obviously, that enacts laws, and we have statutes on the books that are designed to give our fisheries managers the tools and the direction that they need to properly manage our fisheries. And then you have the executive branch that obviously is the regulatory side. So you have the governor that appoints the secretary of the Department of Environmental Quality, who in turn supervises the Division of Marine Fisheries, and the governor also appoints all 9 commissioners to the North Carolina Marine Fisheries Commission.
Let me ask you this. Then we will get off of this. Do you ever get frustrated? It's frustrating to me that since we elect our House representatives, our state senators, and all, every 2 to 4 years somebody's getting elected, that maybe you've been talking to somebody for a couple of years or maybe a couple of decades, and then they don't win re-election and a new person comes in and they have no clue what you're talking about. Is that ever frustrating for you? It has been for me.
It's a frustrating process dealing with the legislature in general. We have, obviously, I call myself like a single issue voter. I'm voting for politicians that I think are going to help advance our cause and our mission. And so when you go to the legislature, you've got 120 House members and 50 senators, and they all come in with their own ideas and their own reasons for wanting to be there. And there's a lot of things that are thrown at them. And it probably takes them 2 years to figure out, where the bathrooms are in that building. And so it is frustrating that things move very slowly in a lot of cases. We're looking at a Fisheries Reform Act that was passed in 1997. It's had a couple of tweaks to it over the years, but really we're still operating under the same tenets that were created back in 1997.
On your plate now, let's say the top three. I don't know, there might just be one, there might be five, but let's say the top three priorities on your plate right now that you're working on. What are you working on? What's the CCA of North Carolina working on?
Well, the number one, I guess, time-consuming aspect of what we're working on right now is the lawsuit. That is something that we filed in 2020, and so we're now 4 years into this, and we finally have a trial date coming up in April. So that's the slow wheels of justice in a nutshell. So that's a big part of what we're working on right now. We are also working on a pretty big, what we look at as a habitat project for next year. One of the things that we have decided to get involved with to kind of promote the reef building aspect and the habitat creation of what we do. We've bought reef ball forms that we are actually going to use to build reef balls, and we're going to take those around to the schools and go to the school systems and do like a hands-on project with them, where they would actually, the students would be, we talk to them about fisheries and conservation and why habitat's important to that sustainability goal, and they would actually have them help us build reef balls that we would then take to a storage yard and partner with the Division of Marine Fisheries and their artificial reef program to identify sites where these reef balls can go back into the water and create additional habitat for our fisheries.
I do want to interject that several years ago, my television production company produced a video for the Long Bay Artificial Reef Program. It was all about reef balls, and that was really, pardon the pun, my big splash in learning about reef balls. Those are very productive entities. We'll get into detail about that later, and I'm glad to hear you guys are working with those.
So we're excited about that. It's a good way to go out into the public and talk to them about why conservation is important, why they should be involved. And again, these are people that may not fish, and so we're excited about that program for next year.
All right, so that was two things. Maybe a third thing that you can think of that's on your plate that you're looking at. We got the lawsuit, we got the reef balls, the education. A third thing?
Well, the third thing, I guess, will be on the advocacy side. Like I said, we've got a new legislature coming in. We've got some new folks over there. There'll be some new leadership. We'll be involved in following what goes on at the legislature. We've got a new administration with Josh Stein coming in. So we've got a new governor. Just saw today where he's announced his pick for the new Secretary of DEQ will be Reed Wilson, who has been heading up the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources for Governor Cooper. So we'll be watching all of those things and working, and we'll continue to work with the Marine Fisheries Commission. We attend all of their meetings. They have 4 a year, in addition to any advisory committee meetings or public hearings that they have. So we'll be working closely with them on issues that'll be coming up next year. I think that I'm not sure that we have any blockbuster fisheries management plans on the table this year. We just got through speckled trout. That's supposed to be finalized in February. I do know that there are some talks about southern flounder coming back up. I think there's plans for an Amendment 4 to go ahead and start looking at that. So there'll be a lot of those types of issues that'll be on our plate next year for sure.
Something else I want to bring up from that annual report from the Division of Marine Fisheries, a statistical report that stunned me with the listing of the top 5 fish that are targeted and caught each year. One fish, striped bass, only showed up one time in 10 years as a targeted and landed fish here in North Carolina. That stunned me. But the biggest stunner, because we know we've just gone through a situation with flounder, that flounder did not show up in any of the top 5 during the past 10 years as a targeted and landed fish. That stunned me.
Yeah. Well, it just shows how things have changed over the last few decades, doesn't it?
It does. One thing that tickled me was one of the fish that made an appearance was puffers. So it's not a sexy fish, but a delicious eating fish. And I'm glad that that's being utilized by folks, because I remember 30 years ago, you go walking on a pier and people just leave them on the pier because they thought it was a garbage fish. So what are you? I know you've got so many things that are going on, and because of the nature of you represent recreational fishermen. You do not represent commercial fishermen, correct?
No, not directly. No,
Okay.
we're not. Yeah.
So you, who are? I just want to clarify. Who does the CCA represent?
We represent the people of North Carolina and their interest in conservation. Now, it's like I said, a lot of our members are recreational anglers. We do have people who have commercial licenses that are members of CCA. I was at a life member event in New Bern not too long ago, and had a gentleman that I was talking to that said, he said, I'm a life member of CCA, but I'm also have a commercial fishing license. And so, I can't say that we don't represent commercial fishermen, not in the way that a group like NCFA would, but our position is that every citizen of North Carolina, including commercial fishermen, would benefit in the long term if the mismanagement of our coastal fish stocks was halted and our fish stocks were restored and managed to ensure ecological sustainability.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask, because we've got so many different types of fish, and you can't manage all the fish the same way. So how do you prioritize? Is just what certain sectors that are going, like, again, the flounder thing confused me because there was a big brouhaha when the recreational flounder fishery was shut down in 2024. So how do you prioritize what species of fish? Because again, you can't do them all.
Our focus has always been on state managed species. And so what we look at, and again, what's most important to the public angler, what are they interested in? And that's why, spotted sea trout or speckled trout, over the last couple of years where that plan's been under review, that's a species of fish that's very important to anglers. As you can see based on the landings and the targeted trips,
Right.
that's something that a lot of people have gravitated to, and is kind of the part of that fishing down the food web. When you talk about, now people don't put down that they're targeting flounder anymore. Well, that's because, the season's closed, they can't harvest anymore. So their focus may shift to another species like red drum or speckled trout. So our focus has always been on those state managed species that are most important to anglers.
I've got just came into my little old head, an unfair question because it's a huge question. What is conservation? You want to conserve the species. How do you define that? How is that defined? And again, it's got to be species by species. So how are we defining conservation?
The way I define it is to say it's a matter of taking some pressure off of a fishery. So what we've done in North Carolina, the way we've managed fish for decades, is that we've set a target based on maximum sustainable yield. So we have fisheries managers that have pressure. Instead of what's the best interest of the fishery, they have pressure coming from user groups saying we want to harvest more fish. We want to provide fish for the consumer, or we want to take fish home. So they're always managing up to that maximum sustainable yield. Instead, we need to be looking at putting something away for the future. That's to me what conservation is about. We need to have a conservation buffer when we put these plans together, because there is a lot of uncertainty involved in the science of fisheries management. It's never going to be an exact science. You can't go out and count every fish that's out there like you can count trees in the forest. So there's going to be some uncertainty. So that's why we've always advocated for a precautionary approach in management that says, let's create a buffer for conservation to make sure that we're not overfishing when we our intent is not to be overfished.
When
And so I go back to flounder, Bill. So when people now say, "Well, I don't understand why we can't keep more flounder," I'm seeing more flounder than I'm ever seen. Well, that's the point of conservation. We had to have those drastic measures that were put in place back in 2019, and when Amendment 3 and Amendment 4, Amendment 2 and Amendment 3 came along, and all of a sudden, the scientists are saying we're beyond arguing about the science. We got to take some drastic measures, and we did that. And we see those very short harvest seasons for commercial and recreational harvest. And now all of a sudden people are seeing flounder. I mean, the last time I went fishing, it was not a target species for me. And what I was catching more of was flounder than anything else. And that's what you would hope would happen. If you take some pressure off the fisheries, they can come back and they can recover.
When is it a red flag on a species? Is it strictly off of the recreational catch, or are you factoring in the commercial catch? And the reason why I'm bringing this up is I used to be the coordinator for the Tag a Giant Bluefin Tuna Conservation Series. And one of the things in the 90s that we discovered is that bluefin tuna, they're going around the Atlantic Ocean. They're going Nova Scotia, heading on down here. Will go through like a 7 to 8 year cycle in terms of numbers and size. Which like this year we're getting 930 pound bluefin tuna, which just landed a few weeks ago. But next year, watch out, or the year after that, watch it, all of a sudden, boom, they'll get smaller and maybe not as plentiful. So my question is, what's the matrix that you're going, oops, this particular fishery is in trouble?
Well, I think that fisheries managers have a toolbox that they can look at, and part of that is looking at those annual trends. You can look at landings, certainly. If landings are going down in a certain species, then that's a red flag. The Division of Marine Fisheries has their juvenile abundance index surveys that they do every year. There's things that they can look at on an annual basis to give them basically a temperature for where a fishery is. Now, the problem that we've had in North Carolina is that what I would classify as an over-reliance on the stock assessment. So when we do a fisheries management plan, which the Division of Marine Fisheries is required by statute to do fisheries management plans, but they take too long to get implemented. And that's one of the problems we run into. And we can use, speckled trout as a great example. They have a stock assessment that was done in 2000. It was approved in 2021 based on terminal year data of 2019. So we're talking about 5-year-old data at this point, and we still don't have a new plan in place when the stock assessment determined that that overfishing was occurring.
How do you factor in things? Because speckled trout, thinking of that specifically, in things such as environmental conditions, like we might have a winter of hard freezes, and speckled trout are affected. We might have a horrible hurricane, and all of a sudden things are just completely changed around. How do you factor in things such as that?
For years, we didn't factor any of that in. And, we do have protocols in place now. Specifically, you mentioned a cold stun event for speckled trout. We do have that isn't embedded in the plan, that if we do have a cold stun, the director has proclamation authority to shut down the fishery. But what we've done in the past is we haven't made any changes based on these, environmental events that may happen until we have a new fisheries management plan, which can take 5 or 6 years to get implemented. But what they're putting in there now are what they call adaptive management measures, which gives them some flexibility to deal with something when it comes up, like a cold stun. And you're exactly right. We're very fortunate we haven't had one since like 2018. Right. But let's keep an eye on this weekend. It's supposed to be some pretty severe temperature drops coming in. I had seen one forecast that said a big snowstorm, but I haven't seen anything else about that. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But that would be devastating.
Let me ask you this, because we're starting to run out of time. We've been talking with David Sneed, the executive director of the Coastal Conservation Association of North Carolina. This is our first time of doing an interview, so I just wanted to get some things out. So I'm going to have to start streamlining things here. Science and politics. That's the third topic that you listed that you'd like to talk about. The only thing I'd like to ask is too much politics and science, or not enough science and politics?
Yeah, I would agree with that on both ends. Over the years that I've been attending the Marine Fisheries Commission meetings, it's a common theme where you have disagreement about the science. When you have Division of Marine Fisheries staff bringing forward science, you have disagreements about that, or a lack of scientific data on a certain issue that may be brought up. They'll say, well, we don't have enough data on that. And then the next step in that is, well, we don't have the funding to pay for the studies or the staff, the resources to do it. And then you get competing interests from stakeholders. So you've got a Marine Fisheries Commission whose job is to manage and preserve and protect and enhance our coastal fisheries. That's their job. That's the job they signed on for. But too many times we don't follow the science. Our decision making should be based on science-driven management. But they're looking at it always devolves into an asset allocation. Who's going to get more fish? How are we going to distribute these fish? When, like I said, going back, if we manage the fisheries for long-term sustainability and viability, then everybody would benefit.
The frustrating thing for me in regards to science and politics is when people believe the science when it's in their favor and discount the science when it's not. And you can't really pick and choose what you like and don't like. David, in our waning seconds here, in regards to conservation, I want to bring up shrimp trawls and gill nets. What is the official status or standpoint of the CCA in regards to gill nets and shrimp trawls here in North Carolina?
I think one of the problems we have with our fisheries management plans and the way we manage fisheries in North Carolina is we're not accounting for all discards in our fisheries. And in the science that we've seen from the Division of Marine Fisheries on their shrimp trawl studies is we're killing a lot of juvenile fish in shrimp trawls every year. And if we've got fisheries that are declining and in trouble, then we need to look at all sources of discards and have a better count of that. And that's something, again, that's the argument where some people say, well, I don't believe those numbers. I don't think the bycatch ratio is accurate. We need more studies. Well, we need more studies. Let's have more studies, but these things need to be accounted for.
David, we just got the notice that our Zoom meeting's about to end. We've run out of time. Can we come back sometime in the future and talk some more?
Sure. Be glad to.
Fantastic. We've been talking with David Sneed, the Executive Director of the Coastal Conservation Association of North Carolina. I'm Bill Hitchcock. Thanks for tuning in.
Post your questions, comments, and concerns here on YouTube or email them directly to Bill Hitchcock at this address.